I'm going to go out in the garden and get some things done. The audio is going to be a little off because my microphone and this camera is not working very well. I'm pretty sure the adapter went bad. Put up with my slightly more terrible audio and we'll get back to normal pretty soon. I cut the tops of my rubber boots off because they were getting all tore up anyway, and that extends the life of my boot for just a little longer. Hey Maggie. You did okay, girl? Huh? You did okay? Before we get into the garden, I'm going to walk up and show you the mulch garden after the flood went through. We had some rushing river torrential rains that created a little flood in the orchard, and I lost a lot of mulch. I'm going to show you what it looks like and where that mulch went. The waters were coming from over here and rushing across this direction, and you can see right over here I lost a lot of mulch here. Push these logs around and all the mulch inside here got washed out and pushed to the other side. This now is exposed bare soil, and a lot of mulch is over here. I went ahead and put some of the mulch back around these plants that I had planted. These two on the end were washed out and were buried under here. I had to dig through and find them so I could replant them. Let's go to the other end of the orchard and I'll show you where a lot of the mulch ended up. But way down here on the other end, just outside my non-electrical fence, you can see all of this. This was all grass, and now the waters have pushed all of my mulch up into this area. It was the most water I had ever seen rushing across the front of our property, ever. Meanwhile, back in the garden, we did get a lot of water up here too. And you can see over here by Luke's garden that we had some water pushing the mulch around up here. It mostly affected the pathways, not so much the garden. I did get a lot of water inside the cold frame too, where it had leaked between those lids that I have on there. These are the trays that my tomatoes came in. They're full of rainwater. I'm going to save these and give them back to the lady that sold me the tomatoes so she can reuse them. Now let's take a look in the cold frame and see what grew, what didn't, and what condition they're in. All of these tomatoes in these larger pots, these are the ones that I purchased from a local lady who grew them from seed. All of these, most of those are peppers that never sprouted. This is a lemon balm, and these are a Hawaiian melon. We got the melons and the lemon balm from the local gardening meetup that we had recently. These cucumbers are doing amazing. They really want to be in the garden. That's what we're going to do today. A lot of these cucumbers, they grew 2 seeds in a pot. I'm going to see if I can separate those and save both plants. In order to do that, I need to get this whole cell out. There we go. If I tried to pull these apart, I would probably just destroy the plants. So rather than that, I'm going to try to soak them in water. I've done this before with tomato plants and it works out fine. I've never done it with a cucumber or really anything other than a tomato. So I'm just lowering it in the water. I'm basically just letting the water and gravity erode the soil away from the roots so that I can have 2 root balls that are basically still undisturbed. Very gently massaging and bouncing that water around to let that soil just fall off. With very little pulling, they come apart and hopefully are still viable to plant into the ground without being hurt by separating or taking that soil off the roots. I'm going to plant these cucumbers along the edge of this trellis so they can climb the trellis and hopefully I can harvest from the inside. It doesn't take much of a hole because there's not much of a root mass there. This will probably benefit from a little calcium just like the tomato plants do. And we'll just mix that in with our hands, just like that. Place that root right down in there and gently push that soil up around it. Some of the cucumbers only have one per spot. They only grew one seed. So I'm going to plant those on the other side of the trellis. Then we can compare whether my water separation of roots was a good thing or not. This is where I've had a lot of basil growing over the last couple years, and I'm still hoping that the basil decides to grow back right here. We're going to get these melons out of here and planted on this side and this side of this arch right here. If this works, I'm really going to love growing on these cattle panel trellises because I have this dream, this vision, a fantasy maybe, of everything growing up over the trellis, giving me the ability to walk under the trellis and harvesting from the inside. It may just be a fantasy. Oh, but if it works, it is so going on Pinterest. These melons were started in peat pots. Now, some people, and even I in the past, just plant that directly in the ground just as it is. But there are some recorded challenges where people notice that the roots have a hard time growing through that peat pot. So for these, I'm going to plant them in the pot. But I'm just going to rip the bottom off. That way, I still have the stability of the pot around, but the roots can grow out through the bottom, just like that little guy right there. Now I hope you noticed that I planted the melons on this trellis and the cucumbers on that trellis back there. I don't want them next to each other because they are not good companion plants. In the past, I have noticed that the flavor of each, cucumbers and the melons, are not as good when they're planted next to each other. I looked it up after the fact and confirmed by other people's experience that they don't companion well and they will ruin the flavor of each other. This terracotta pot right here has Apios americano in there, and that looks like it's starting to grow up right here. I don't know if you can see that baby little plant growing up. Those will create really beautiful vines that go up over the trellis, and the root is actually edible. Inside here in the cold frame, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 moringa plants, hopefully to replace those that I lost because the rats killed them. And do you guys remember that little meatloaf joke I made a few videos back about my Mexican mint marigolds being named Want You, Need You, and Love You? And I said that 2 out of 3 ain't bad because I thought that one died. I guess given the right conditions, you really can have all 3. Oh, there's plenty more to see in the garden, but this video was getting way too long. So I decided to cut it off and I'll show you the rest later this week. Thank you so much for hanging out with me in the Daddykirbs garden. I'll talk to you soon.